Hey guys, this is another Beatles fan, and 1, 2, 3, 4, The Beatles in Time by Craig Brown is the most fun I've ever had with any Beatle related content that wasn't produced by the Beatles themselves. And that's an extremely interesting thing to mention because I am a huge Beatles nerd. I've consumed Beatles stuff ever since I was a kid. So this book actually has flown under my radar. I got it through a friend of mine who went to the UK and she bought it for me. And when she gave it to me, I had to be honest with her. I had no idea what this book was about. I'd never heard of it, but it had won the Bailey Gifford Prize for nonfiction. I'm sorry if I butchered that. And so I was extremely interested. I started reading some stuff on the internet, and the reviews were cool. And so I thought, you know what, I'm gonna give this one a shot. And so I did. After reading McCartney Legacy, I came to this, and I'm a very slow reader, so it took me a while because it's a big book, man. It's got 620 pages, and I gotta tell you, again, it's super fun. It's got a really cool structure because it's all structured around small chapters, and for me, it reads great because of that. Again, it's the Beatles in time, so it goes chronologically in order. Of course, it does a bit of jumping here and there, but it's mostly chronologic, and it tells the story through the small chapters I mentioned, and they're almost like chronicles. They read like usually funny stories or anecdotes, and it has something different for all types of fans. Because when I started reading it, especially in the first part where he mentions Hamburg, and there's a ton of stuff covered in the Beatles Tune In All Those Years, which is the holy grail of the Beatles books. So I started the book off by thinking that maybe this isn't a book for me. Maybe this is a book for Beatles novices, the guys who have just started learning about the band and they want to know more about it. And but I was wrong because it tells the stories I knew in a different light. It's again a humorous, laid-back book that makes you feel like you're kind of in the Beatles' shoes sometimes, and it has something for everyone. Again, it has the stories I already knew being told in an entertaining way, but also it tells cool side stories of side characters of the Beatles universe that usually you wouldn't have heard of. And this is a great medium to do so. So I definitely recommend this to, the Beatles nerd, but also to a fellow person who loves music but maybe doesn't know much about the Beatles. This is a great start on it. And again, as I mentioned, it's got the point of view of different people. It talks about themselves, it talks about their close friends, their lovers, their fans, their haters, and other celebrities, and what was going on at the time. And that made it super fun because, of course, it talks about all the major moments in the Beatles' career, like, for example, the Ed Sullivan Show. But it mentions a certain person who was able to get there all of a sudden because their mom had bought them a surprise ticket. Or it mentions the video clip for Hey Jude and how they gather people to go on that clip. And suddenly you're in the shoes of a guy who is a New Yorker walking through London, and he gets an invitation that he doesn't even know if it's a fake or not, but he decides to go there, and he hops on a bus, and suddenly he's on Twickenham Studios filming the Beatles' Hey Jude, and he gets Ringo's tambourine, so he appears with Ringo's tambourine on the video in itself. That type of story is super entertaining, super fun. It makes you feel, again, like you're a part of the story. And we gotta come back to the title, The Beatles in Time. This is a really great description of the book because it sets them in the 60s, and it paints a great picture of what came before them and what they were like and what they did and how that affected the entire Western world, basically, because that's what they did, right? And it's got a ton of personal stuff too. That's where I feel like some people may not like some of those books because it can be read as gossip. But in my opinion, it doesn't read as gossip. It's something that happened more than 50 years before us at this point. This book is 2020, was released in 2020, so 50 years before us. And we are at a point now where I think we can analyze their work and their influence also by knowing who they were as people, and that's extremely important, right? Shakespeare wrote all those plays because he was a type of guy in a type of society with a background to him, and that of course pours into his work. Same with the Beatles, of course, and that's even more tangible, right? So I do think like the personal stuff here is written in a sense that makes you understand that everything being said here really reflects in the music. I really have nothing bad to say about this book. I really liked it, and I mentioned that the chapters are short. It tells the story chronologically, like in a chronicle sense. But it also paints two big pictures, and I wanted to end this video with them. Number one, again, I've already mentioned this, but the Beatles really changed stuff in the 60s, society-wise, music-wise, and this here talks a lot about that and how people view that change and how it points out that, yeah, older people at the time didn't understand it and viewed it as just noise and didn't view it as a musical movement of real artistic expression. And this is something I gotta blame myself. I am an old person inside of a young person's body. I don't like new music. I don't like the Taylor Swifts and the rappers of the world. So I do see myself as a bit of an old geezer at times, like Old Man Yells at Cloud, and who really sometimes thinks that, yeah, maybe music was better there, but then, on the 60s and 70s, but really, that was something that everybody was saying about the Beatles at the time. The old guys, of course. And, there's plenty of stuff to think about. Also, before I stop with the video, another big picture of the book, a big point that he touches on, and I want to find a picture of it. It's this paperback version with pictures. Brian Epstein. This book really talks about Epstein's. I know it's Epstein, right? I'm sorry. I said Epstein, but the real, he liked to be called Epstein, if I'm not mistaken. So Brian's contributions and influence to the band and how he shaped the Beatles, and after he died, everything kind of went to hell. That's the main point of the book. So also, if I haven't already convinced you to read this one, if you want to read about Brian and his great contribution to the boys' life and Western music in general, this is the way to go. This, along with Tune In, which is the book I mentioned before, helped me understand how big of an impact Brian had on the Beatles, and they wouldn't have been 1% of what they were without Brian. And it's easier to think about George Martin's contribution in that sense. I think I'm digressing here, but my main point is Brian is a real unsung hero of the Beatles, and nobody kind of knows about that. George Martin is even more famous than him, and I do think both of them are the fifth Beatles. And I really want to make a video where I talk more about Brian. There's a movie coming out called Midas Man about him. Let's see if it's good or not. And anyway, I guess that's it. I'm sorry. At the back end here, I just started talking a bit of nonsense, I think. But that's what I had to talk about this one. Have you read this one? Have you heard of it? Because I hadn't. What do you guys think of it? This is The Beatles, 1, 2, 3, 4, The Beatles in Time by Craig Brown. I am another Beatles fan, and I'll see you later. Thank you guys so much.